Hey folks, this is Jesse Cope back with another episode of the American Soul Podcast. Hope y'all are doing well, wherever y'all are, whatever part of the day you're in. Sure do appreciate y'all joining me, continuing to join me. Give me a little bit of your time each day. Hope it gives you a little something, gives our nation a little something, and maybe, I don't know, makes your day a little smoother or something. For those of y'all that continue to share the podcast, thank you so much. Last month was the best month we've had by a decent margin. And so I nothing else to say, but thank you. I'm incredibly grateful, humbled by it, and I will continue to try and make good use of your time. Going to go for one of our little walks. One puppy dog slowly making her way out. Had to roust herself out from under the shade. The guineas are hopefully going to be noisy somewhere else, and our normal summertime music here in the background, the cicadas, confirming that it is hot and dry. Not that most of us needed that reassurance or confirmation. All right, we're going to go back to Ten Commandments. Try and finish that up. We didn't quite make it to 5 the other day, so we're going to start there. We're going to run through some examples, and then I'm going to try and wrap it up with just a couple comments. We could stay on this for quite a while, folks, and these are just some examples, many of which I pulled from the Founder's Bible. If you don't have a copy, highly recommend that. A phenomenal resource and often leads to other sources of information for me. So we'll get going. The 5th commandment is to honor your parents. In 1642, there was a Connecticut law that cited or stated the following. If any child or children above 16 years old and of sufficient understanding shall curse or smite their normal father or mother, he or they shall be put to death, unless it can be sufficiently testified that the parents have been very unchristianly negligent in the education of such children, or so provoke them by extreme and cruel correction that they have been forced thereunto to preserve themselves from death or maiming. Exodus 21:17, Leviticus 20, Exodus 20:12. So those Bible verses were actually cited by this Connecticut law. 1934, jump forward in time, a few centuries, Louisiana. Honor thy father and thy mother is as much a command of the municipal law as it is a part of the Decalogue, regarded as holy by every Christian people. A child, says the code, whatever be his age, owes honor and respect to his father and mother. The 6th commandment, do not murder. 1641, Massachusetts law, citing Exodus 21:12, Numbers 35:13, 14, 30, and 31. If any person commit any willful murder, which is manslaughter committed upon premeditated malice, hatred, or cruelty, not in a man's necessary and just offense, nor by mere casualty against his will, he shall be put to death. Exodus 21:14. If any person shall slay another through guile, either by poisoning or other such devilish practice, he shall be put to death. Kentucky, 1932, this is from an appeals court. Following the promulgation of Moses at Mount Sinai, has required of each and every one of its citizens that thou shalt not murder, Exodus 20:13. If that law is violated, the one guilty of it has no right to demand more than a fair trial. And if, as a result thereof, the severest punishment for the crime is visited upon him, he has no one to blame but himself. A couple phenomenal thoughts, not phenomenal thoughts, folks. I don't have very many of those, but I think points here that they just kind of wove in. One, they're citing in these laws. I'm not putting the Bible verses in, folks. Those are there already from these law appeals court, etc. And the other thing is this in these cases the death penalty is applied, and so this modern argument about whether the death penalty should or shouldn't be used has any Christian backing or not. It's a pretty clear indication that our founders and those just from a generation or two before them absolutely thought them applicable in severe cases and these examples. So just thought that was interesting to note. Seventh commandment, do not commit adultery. This is Massachusetts, 1641. If any person committeth adultery with a married or espoused wife, the adulterer and adulteress shall surely be put to death. Exodus 20:14. 1787 Vermont law stated, whereas the violation of the marriage covenant is contrary to the command of God, Exodus 20:14, and destructive to the peace of families, be it therefore enacted by the General Assembly of the State of Vermont that if any man be found in bed with another man's wife or woman with another's husband, etc. Certainly. Well, let me read a couple more here. 1898, Texas. Thou shalt not commit adultery is our law as well as the law of the Bible. And 1955, Washington Supreme Court. Adultery, whether promiscuous or not, violates one of the 10 Commandments and the statutes of the state. Again and again, we see that laws at the state level were based on the 10 Commandments, right? And how far have we fallen that adultery, I mean, you can't even, it's not even, we don't even worry about it today. It's just part of life. And it's okay. We just kind of brush it under the rug. It's heterosexual sex outside of marriage. No big deal. Has no effect on society, right? Right. Eighth commandment, do not steal. 1951 Louisiana Supreme Court. In the 10 Commandments, the basic law of all Christian countries is found, the admonition, thou shalt not steal. 1940 Supreme Court of California. Thou shalt not steal applies with equal force and propriety to the industrialist, a complex civilization, as to the simple herdsman of ancient Israel. Ninth commandment, do not perjure yourself. Connecticut 1642 law. If any man rise up by false witness, wittingly and of purpose to take away any man's life, he shall be put to death. Deuteronomy 19:16, 18, and 19. 1924 Oregon Supreme Court. No official is above the law. Thou shalt not bear false witness is a command of the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, and that forbidden act is denounced by statute as a felony. You get the idea, folks, that this is a pretty wide-ranging basis, right? So we're going to talk about this at the end of the podcast today, but we've taken the 10 Commandments out of schools, out of the education of our youth. We've taken them out of a number of institutions, state, federal, local buildings, right? Just keep that in the back of your mind as we're going through this. 10th commandment, do not covet. A comment on this by John Adams, second president. The moment the idea is admitted into society that property is not as sacred as the laws of God, and that there is not a force of law and public justice to protect it, anarchy and tyranny commence. If thou shalt not covet and thou shalt not steal were not commandments of heaven, they must be made inviolable precepts in every society before it can be civilized or made free. 1917. So there's the do not covet. There's a ton of other examples out there. There's a number here listed in the Founder's Bible if you have a copy of that. I mean, they're from all over the place. 1895, California Supreme Court, 1904, West Virginia, 1951, Oregon Supreme Court, et cetera, et cetera. And that makes sense, folks. I mean, you can see that basis still today. Although, as I'm talking, I'm thinking about some of the laws now in some of these more liberal states, California, Illinois, New York. I just saw a case. This wasn't stealing, but where a young man in New York attacked a police officer within the last week or so. And as you dig into the case, you find that this is his, I don't even know what time of being arrested and then released almost repeatedly, you know. But the stealing part, there's a couple places, cities in California now where you have up to a, you know, 700, 800, I don't know, $900 limit, whatever it is, before they really start to get concerned. You just walk in the store and take it, and as long as you stay under that, you know, it's not that big a deal. And so, and you can see if you watch and really pay attention at all, those cities are just crumbling. They're falling apart, and those states are hemorrhaging people, right? And of course, a little side note here, you know, if you're going to move to a place because you really like that place and you're fleeing something you're leaving behind, why in the world would you bring those morals and principles of the place you're leaving behind to the place that you're moving? But yet we see that problem nationally with illegal immigration, and we see it from state to state when so many people flee a state like California to go to Texas or Wyoming or Idaho, but then they want to say, well, this is how we did it in New York. Well, if that was so good, why leave? Just a little side comment, folks, before I get too far off track. So, obviously, the Ten Commandments, the podcast yesterday, today, we've gone through the 10. And, folks, I have not even scratched the surface of examples across from the time the colonies, 1600s, 1700s, all the way to the 20th century. We didn't start to turn away from this until, again, that 47 Supreme Court decision, separation of church and state. And then we started taking God and the Bible just out of everything publicly. And I probably will say this again. We've got a couple podcasts coming up based on that Churchill biography that we talk about. And it's so apparent, folks, the correlations between 1930s British citizens and German citizens and modern America today, citizens, patriotic citizens versus leftist, socialist, communist citizens in America. There's no way to get around the fact that regardless of what our friends, family, neighbors, fellow citizens who support the left, regardless of what they say, their actions over the last 70, 80 years and continuing today still, because the support's still there, the votes, the support, the indifference to the leftist values, godless values, is still there. It's destroying our country, folks. That's what the actions are doing. The people that you think about in your life, because everybody, you know some, guaranteed. Those actions are destroying our nation. And so I'm going to read just a couple things here about how tied in the Ten Commandments. We've known this. It's only today that we've started to reject this. So 1917 Supreme Court of North Carolina. Our laws are founded upon the Decalogue. Not that every case can be exactly decided according to what is there enjoined, but we can never safely depart from this short but great declaration of moral principles without founding the law upon the sand instead of upon the eternal rock of justice and equality. That's a direct reference. I mean, not only did they mention the Ten Commandments, but the sand and rock right there is a New Testament reference that Jesus talks about, whether you, or that's spoken about Jesus, is your foundation on God and Jesus Christ versus the world. Well, if it's God and Jesus Christ, that's on rock. If it's the world, that's on sand, and it quickly crumbles. And so, yet again, the idea of this being some random deity that our founders and our states afterwards founded the country upon is just nonsense. It's specifically Christianity to the exclusion of other religions. 1950 Florida Supreme Court. A people unschooled about the sovereignty of God, the Ten Commandments, and the ethics of Jesus could never have evolved the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution. There is not one solitary fundamental principle of our democratic policy that did not stem directly from the basic moral concepts as embodied in the Decalogue and the ethics of Jesus. Lord, folks, I guarantee you I'm going to start to read this quote more often from the Florida Supreme Court in 1950. And there's also a great quote by Truman that I've stumbled on yet again, reminded myself of. This is why we have to go over this stuff, folks, because I know I can't be the only one that forgets it. You've got to go over it again and again. Truman stated very similar to this. Our country was founded on God and the Bible and the principles of Jesus Christ. Anybody that says otherwise either doesn't know what they're talking about, hasn't read this history, these quotes, these comments, these laws, right? This is from 1950 Florida Supreme Court. Truman was president, late 40s, 1950s. Okay, so this is within the last 80 years when all of this has really started. And they're saying, if you don't know the sovereignty of God, the Ten Commandments, and the ethics of Jesus, there's no way that this country could be founded, and it'll falter. Okay, so here, let me tie this in with one other thing. I think I've got a couple minutes left. So this is a commentary by Barton in the Founders Bible. It is difficult to argue that any single work has had a greater or more far-reaching impact through 4 centuries of American life, law, and culture than the Ten Commandments. Did you know that each commandment finds direct application in America laws? Are you aware that the Constitution even honors the traditional Christian Sabbath? So how is it possible that the public display of the Ten Commandments would become a matter of current debate or prohibition? So, this is going to make some of y'all a little uncomfortable, squirmish. That's just the way it is, folks. It's not something I enjoy. I don't like talking about it. I certainly don't enjoy the fact of the matter, but it is. Why? Why, as Mr. Barton said here, how is it possible the public display of the Ten Commandments would become a matter of current debate or prohibition? Why? Okay, so A, there are people in the country that know that this republic was founded upon God and the Bible and the principles of Jesus Christ, and they don't like it. And B, there are a number of people that either through ignorance or their own malevolence support that, support the opposing values of God, support the godless, the evil values. And we go through this, folks. It's been a while, but we're going to talk about it coming up again. You talk about a rejection of God from our institutions. You talk about abortion. You talk about no-fault divorce and the LGBTQ movement. You talk about the bigotry of critical race theory, the revisionist history pushed in our public education system today. You can talk about illegal immigration, the social push for socialism, communism. There's it's a short list, folks. There's a lot of things we can sit down at the negotiating table, but there are some core values that we have to have and share together. And that's the problem, is we don't today. And we've got to acknowledge that. We're headed like a freight train toward a fight or toward slavery and oppression and the destruction of the American Republic. Unless we manage to turn it around somehow before that, those are the two options. Those are the two doors. The Ten Commandments, absolutely the basis, as so many have said, and you've seen so many examples, right? Know this, keep this, remember it. Think about it. Even if you're not a type A personality, like I say, when somebody starts to say this isn't a Christian nation, you know it's not true. You know it's not true. And folks, if you're willing to share this with some other people so that more and more people know this, we've got to know it. All right, I got to let you go. Thank y'all so much. God bless y'all. God bless your families. God bless America. We will talk to y'all again real soon. Looking forward to it.